Lasagna is one of the greatest pasta dishes of all time, and it's not just because it tastes amazing. Unlike many other pastas, the leftovers reheat incredibly well, and it can be made at home relatively easily for a fraction of the cost of what it might be at a restaurant. So there's no reason why you shouldn't give this classic Italian dish a try. To get started, rough chop 2 small carrots, a couple ribs of celery, and 1 medium yellow onion. And then throw everything into a food chopper or food processor and pulse until it's fine and looks something like this. In a large pot over medium-high heat, add in 3 to 4 tablespoons of olive oil. When the oil is shimmering, add in the finely chopped vegetables and 5 cloves of freshly minced garlic. Sauté everything for 8 to 10 minutes or until the vegetables are soft and translucent. When the vegetables have softened, remove them from the pot and add in 1 to 2 tablespoons of olive oil, along with 2 1/4 pounds of ground beef. Season your beef with salt and pepper and then break it into little pieces using a wooden spoon. As your beef cooks, stir it often so that the bottom doesn't burn and everything cooks evenly. After a few minutes, the beef will be swimming in liquid that a lot of people think is fat, but it's actually mostly water. So continue cooking until all of the water has evaporated. When there's no longer any water in the pot, the sound will go from hissing to a roaring crackle, and this is because the beef will be frying in its own fat. The gray exterior is going to transform into an amazing brown color. If your meat is taking a while to brown, you can help speed up the process by adding in a little extra olive oil. When your meat is mostly browned and is looking something like this, you can add in 3 ounces or 85 grams of tomato paste. When all of the tomato paste is mixed in well with the beef, add in 2 28-ounce cans of high-quality crushed tomatoes. And you really want to look for canned tomatoes where the only ingredients are, well, tomatoes. A lot of canned tomatoes use citric acid as a preservative, and this will make your sauce bitter, so try to avoid it if you can. Once the crushed tomatoes have been mixed in well with the beef, add back in the sauteed vegetables along with 2 teaspoons of oregano, 2 teaspoons of dried basil, 2 teaspoons of dried parsley, 1 teaspoon of dried thyme, and then grind up 2 teaspoons of fennel seeds using a mortar and pestle, but if you don't have one, you can just throw them in whole. Mix in the vegetables and spices and then drop the heat down to low because until we get more liquid in this pot, if this thing boils, it's going to be like an erupting volcano. I forgot to hit record on this next part, but I added in 1.5 cups of chicken stock, which is actually half a bouillon cube mixed with 1.5 cups of hot water. Even after adding in the chicken stock, the sauce is still going to be quite thick. So continue adding water about half a cup at a time until the sauce is thinned out enough that it doesn't make too much of a mess when it simmers. You can also use white wine in place of water to loosen up the sauce. In total, I added about 2.5 cups of water, but the exact amount of water you'll need to add will depend on the brand of canned tomatoes that you use. After adding in additional water, bring the sauce back up to a simmer and then cover it with the lid of jar while the sauce reduces. Reduce the sauce for 1.5 to 2 hours, stirring every 15 minutes. After 1.5 to 2 hours of simmering, the meat should be very tender and the sauce should be quite thick. If your sauce is still thin, continue simmering until it has thickened up because we don't want to have a soupy lasagna. Give the sauce a taste and adjust the seasoning as necessary. I needed to add more salt, some black pepper, a little bit of garlic powder, and the secret ingredient that's really going to make this sauce taste amazing is some sugar. I had to add about 2 tablespoons of sugar in total, but you may need to add a little more, especially if your canned tomatoes have citric acid as an ingredient. So I suggest adding a teaspoon of sugar at a time to help counter the acidity from the tomatoes until everything tastes balanced. When you think your sauce is salted perfectly, add a couple extra pinches. The sauce alone should be too strong, but when combined with the undersalted pasta, it will taste perfect. When you're satisfied with the sauce, remove it from the heat while you prepare the other ingredients. You can also store it in the fridge if you're making this a day ahead. The cheese filling is up next. Add 2 large eggs to a mixing bowl along with 5 grams of salt. Beat the eggs well and then add in 2 pounds or 900 grams of whole milk ricotta cheese, 10 ounces or 285 grams of fresh mozzarella that's been finely diced, 60 grams of freshly grated Parmesan cheese, and then top it off with a shake of cayenne, some freshly ground black pepper, and a couple small handfuls of freshly chopped Italian parsley. Mix all of the ingredients together until well combined, and with that, our cheese filling is done. For the pasta, we're just going to keep it simple with regular old pre-made lasagna noodles. Season a pot of boiling water with a generous amount of salt, and then add in a little bit of olive oil to help prevent the noodles from sticking. For 1 tray of lasagna, we're going to need an entire pound of dry noodles. Once all of the noodles are submerged in the pot, set a timer for 4 minutes and then remove them from the pot and place them into a bowl of cold water. The noodles are going to be far from done, but that is fine since it's going to be baking in the oven for an hour. We are just looking to boil the noodles long enough so that they are flexible. Now that everything is prepped, it's time for final assembly. For your lasagna pan, you're going to need one that's at least 2 3/4 of an inch deep to fit 3 layers of noodles. First, ladle in some of the meat sauce, enough to coat a light layer on the bottom of the tray. And then put down a layer of noodles with them overlapping about 1/8 of an inch. Trim the noodles to fit the pan as necessary. And on top of the noodles, put down half of the cheese mixture. Spread out the cheese filling evenly, and it can be pretty handy to do this using a offset spatula. On top of the cheese goes a layer of the meat sauce, and you want just enough sauce so you can barely see the cheese layer beneath. On top of the sauce goes our second layer of noodles, and on top of that, our last half of the cheese filling. On top of the cheese filling is another layer of meat sauce, and then put down the last layer of noodles. You may need to cut a noodle straight down the middle because the pan does get wider as it gets to the top. On top of the noodles goes one final layer of meat sauce. Make sure the entire surface of the noodles is covered in sauce, especially the edges because those like to burn. If you're using a 13x9 pan, it's likely that you're going to have a little bit of meat sauce left over. You can store this in the freezer and have it another time with some pasta. To top off the lasagna, grate on as much Parmesan cheese as you would like, and then tear a couple slices of fresh mozzarella and spread them out evenly across the top of the lasagna. Cover the lasagna loosely with a sheet of aluminum foil, being careful not to touch any of the cheese, and then place it onto the center rack of an oven that has been preheated to 375 degrees Fahrenheit and bake it for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, remove the sheet of aluminum foil and continue baking for another 30 to 35 minutes. After about 35 minutes, the edges will be nice and crispy and the cheese will have a light browning. Remove the lasagna from the oven and let it cool for at least 20 minutes before slicing. If you cut the lasagna as soon as you take it out of the oven, the slices will fall apart when you try to portion them out. One tray of lasagna will make about 12 moderately sized servings. Sprinkle on a little bit of finely chopped parsley or basil, and then a nice grating of Parmesan cheese. With a little bit of work and a few hours, you can have an incredible lasagna that would go really well with a cast iron garlic bread, which I already have a video for up on my channel. So whether you have an upcoming special occasion or you're just planning for a weeknight dinner, I really hope you give this lasagna recipe a try soon. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.